a favor, share this to your pages, share this with your friends, tag someone that you be tuned in. And if you've not already subscribed to the Matter of Focus social media pages, go ahead and do that before we get started. You can do that at Facebook and Instagram. I'll see you in a minute. Hey, everyone, and welcome to another Monday with Mel. I'm Mel Preston, licensed mental health therapist, your neighborhood therapist, and the relationship architect. And every day, I help people rebuild, reestablish, and just learn more about their relationships. And Mondays with Mel was created to incorporate everything at the intersection of relationships and mental wellness. So if you know someone that should be tuning in, make sure you go ahead and tag them now, as well as sharing this out on either Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. It would really help me out. Yeah. And that is where all of the Mondays with Mel are housed. All right. So I want to go ahead and get started. So listen, how many of you have watched the movie Wakanda Forever? I need you to put a one in the chat if you've watched Wakanda Forever. Now, personally, I've seen this movie 3 times. I know that's a little excessive, but I've seen the movie 3 times. The first time the night it came out with my husband. The second time we went to take our children. And the third time was on our Thanksgiving trip to Mississippi. And yeah, I was able to see different. I was able to see different themes every single time I watched the movie, right? So, for those of you who are late in the game and you have not watched the movie, don't worry, there won't be any spoilers during this. So, I decided to kind of keep it light in order to be sure that there weren't any spoilers. Now, um, one of the main things I noticed in the movie is what we consider collective trauma. And I don't know if you know anything about collective trauma. So I want to go ahead and give you that definition. So what collective trauma is it is our psychological reaction to a traumatic event. And it is a traumatic event that doesn't just affect us individually, but it affects an entire society, an entire community. It affects an entire group of people. So in the movie, what we see is we see this collective trauma that is happening. And what I wanted to do was also be able to use this to really set a foundation of how we see collective trauma within our community, um, as well as our work environments. Because a lot of times when there is collective trauma, it's not only affecting us in our collective in our spaces within our particular communities, but it also impacts how we react, how we move through life, even in the workplace. So it's important to understand what collective trauma looks like, and how you can be prepared for it. I want you to be able to see it. I want you to be able to view it. I want you to be able to pick it out. But I also want you to start learning. I want everybody to start learning how to work with people who are dealing with collective trauma. All right, cool. So here we go. Now, in the movie, here is what we know. There is a traumatic event, and it's amazing the way the traumatic event fits within the scope of the movie, because it was also a traumatic event that we experienced within the world, right? And that was the passing of Chadwick Boseman. So as we enter the movie, and so of course this is not a spoiler because everyone knows that Prince T'Challa is dead. So the traumatic event is that Prince T'Challa has died. Okay. And it's not just that he has passed away, but it is, you see a community that is mourning the passing of this great king, the passing of the Black Panther. And when we look at what psychological reactions are anything that are happening emotionally, as well as those cognitive reactions we have, right? So what does it look like when we are having these psychological reactions? Now, I'm going to name some, and many of these you will, if you haven't already, you will see in the movie. So when it comes to emotional reactions, there's fear, there can be grief, there can be anger, even guilt. There is the possibility of resentment showing up in the form of an emotional reaction. You can see that people can be numb when it comes to collective trauma, as well as being overwhelmed, right? So these are some things that we saw in the movie. And even when you think about different tragedies that we have dealt with within our communities. Two, I can think of, and of course, these are not the only ones that are considered collective trauma. But if we look at just traumatic events as a whole, I think we could all agree that COVID-19 has been a collective traumatic event, right? And that is one where we as a society, not just Black people or white people or Asian or any other ethnic group, it wasn't subjective to just one particular group, right? But that is something that we felt collectively, as not just as a nation, but the world felt that, right? Then there is collective trauma, such as when Floyd passed, Breonna Taylor, and uh, you- numerous other individuals who are African American that whose life has been cut short due to police brutality. Now, those are traumatic events that were felt and continue to be felt within your African American population, your minority population. So that is also something that we would consider a collective trauma. But as you can see, collective trauma it has a it has many layers. It could be collective trauma in the form of it's women, right? So a lot of the Me Too movement would be considered collective trauma, as we have witnessed many women coming forward regarding inappropriate sexual advances, rape, all of the things. This would also be considered collective trauma. When we look at um, things such as, even when we look at things such as, um, oh, wow, the passing of Kobe Bryant, I would say that could also be in the realm of a traumatic event, right? It's whatever we consider to be a traumatic event that we feel as an entire community, as an entire society. So, as we get back to Wakanda Forever, several of the on the cognitive side of those psychological reactions, you can see difficulty concentrating, right? And as I am listing these things, I want you to also pay attention to how these reactions would show up in your workplace after we have gone through a traumatic event. How would you see this play out within your workplace? So people show up and they have difficulty concentrating, or there is confusion. They don't know whether they're coming or going. They're indecisive, have trouble making decisions, or one of the big ones that happened in the movie was questioning spiritual beliefs. Um, in a lot of times also within collective trauma, when something detrimental happens, there is a questioning of spiritual beliefs. But these are some of those psychological reactions that you may see when it comes to collective trauma. Okay. Now, as it relates to, oh yeah, and make sure if you have questions, if you have comments, go ahead and drop those in the chat. If there's a question that I need to come back and address, I absolutely will. I would love to, right? So make sure that you are putting your comments in, also asking your questions. All right. So I just have a few more things I want to cover when it comes to collective trauma. Um, the first thing that we see as it relates to collective trauma, and again, the same way that we saw it in the movie in Wakanda Forever, we see the same thing in our communities now. We see the same thing when it comes to how it again shows up in the workplace. The workplace could be everything from a school system to any entity in corporate America, right? But when collective trauma happens, one of the first things we see is it changes the entire fabric of a population. In the movie, the entire fabric of the kingdom of Wakanda is forever changed. It is no longer the same. The relationships within the community are changed. The relationships outside the community are changed. But what we see is an entire kingdom, the way they operate, the way they think, the way they feel with each other. It's changed. So in collective trauma, again, number one, it changes the entire fabric of a population of people, of a collective, of the group of people. It changes your policies. It changes the procedures, right? So, for instance, when we saw the collective trauma that's been happening, especially when it comes to police brutality, when it comes to um, sexual advances, when it comes to sex trafficking, a lot of these things that would be considered collective trauma, we then also begin to see political changes. We begin to see governmental changes. The laws start to change. In the movie, you're able to see where, because of the trauma, there are different rules that are being challenged, right? The Kingdom of Wakanda and Queen Rwanda are attempting to, of course, protect vibranium, which they've always done. However, the way people view them has changed because of their collective trauma. That's another thing that you will notice, not just in the movie, but in the world. The kingdom of Wakanda starts to realize that people see them differently. And because people see them differently, they start to um, they start to really observe and to um, basically understand that the way they may see themselves is not the same as the way other people see them. And it causes a shift in their perspective of outside entities, not just one, but several. The same thing exists within our groups of communities. When certain groups of people start to feel that they are looked upon in a certain way, um, it changes their view, changes their perception of how they interact with people who are not from their community, who are not from their group of peers, right? So it is important that as we learn more about collective trauma, um, that we understand this perspective, right? So, any questions so far? Any questions so far? If you have questions, again, put them in the chat. If not, then I will keep going because I just have a few more things and then we're going to wrap up. So we've already talked about how collective trauma, how it impacted, how it impacts relationships and how it impacts the fabric of the community. It also impacts policies, right? So security measures changed within the Kingdom of Wakanda. How many times have we seen policies changed or we've seen lobbying for policy changes after a collective trauma? How many times on your job have you been a part of policy changes or committees that are formed to um, kind of navigate those changes? Those things are necessary when it comes to collective trauma. So, lastly, one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk about um, collective trauma and how it impacts us is because there are a ton of buzzwords when it comes to mental health. But one of those buzzwords, or one of the terms, is being trauma informed, right? And being and providing trauma informed care. And so, what I want to leave you with is what being trauma informed means. Being trauma informed means that we not just understand the impact of trauma, but that we also start to recognize the signs, the symptoms of when it's happening, recognizing the signs and the symptoms of those who are being affected. Because these are people you work with day in and day out. And what you don't want to do is to re traumatize people based on being ill prepared when trauma is happening within the world. Okay. So being trauma informed and not just acknowledging that things are happening, but being able to empathize, being able to, for lack of a better word, have a different perspective, being able to see from another person's point of view, to understand that things that you may it may be appropriate to address those employees, those friends a little differently when these traumatic events are happening. Okay? So, that is collective trauma. Um, this one is very, very quick, but there are a ton of other things we could go into when it comes to being trauma informed, right? So be sure that as you are going through this world, going through everyday life, that when you see the signs of trauma, that we're not just ignoring it, but that we are making sure that we don't re-traumatize. All right. So have a good one. And again, if you have questions, comments, leave those in the comment section, and make sure that you are subscribing to the YouTube page as well as our Facebook and Instagram pages. All right, guys, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.